So what really struck me with franchising, and potentially it's because of the amazing board, but my exposure to these entrepreneurs that I would not normally get anywhere else. That to me was like, wow, these people are so open about their businesses and willing to help in any capacity, whether you're a supplier.
You're talking about the Titus Center Advisory.
Yeah, the Titus Center Advisory Board, but franchising as a whole breeds this community because it's not an industry, right? But it does breed a community of entrepreneurial minded people that are all trying to scale their way using a very similar system or a very similar set of rules. So it creates this language that you can speak with a certain amount of like a small percentage of people. And then that language, I think, in my opinion, is what creates that community.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
I'm John Hayes, and I'm back with another episode of the Franchise Hot Seat brought to you by the Titus Center for Franchising. And this time, my guest, a very special former student, graduate now, of the Titus Center for Franchising, Matthew Cancino, who's got a very interesting and lively career going for himself in franchising, something that I'm sure he never thought was possible before he came to college at PBA. And right off the top, Matt, before you begin, I want to thank you for your service as a United States Marine. I think you were my first Marine. I've since had a second Marine in my class, not as an undergraduate, as an MBA. But you were my first Marine to study franchising with me and to play that into an active career opportunity for you. So thank you for your service, and thank you for coming to PBA and getting into franchising.
Thank you for everything that you've taught me, Professor. And it's kind of funny, but I do like to ask, do you pay taxes?
Yeah, I pay taxes.
Well, thank you for your service because that's how I served in the Marine Corps. So yeah, franchising has been nothing short of a blessing in my life, and I'll never forget the day that I walked into your office because I was looking for a mentor for my detailing brand at the time. I was obsessed with branding, and nothing about franchising, and Professor Coey said to seek you out, and so I did, and you just said to come to your class, and I
Yeah.
trusted you on that, and I did, and I never looked back ever since. But franchising is fascinating. In that, when I had that business, actually, because I was so obsessed with branding, I actually had a customer one time ask me if he can buy one of these for his son,
Yeah.
and I had no idea what that meant. He had a brand new Lincoln Navigator. I just wanted to clean his car and make $90. That's it. Like did
That was
not.
not enough. You should have gotten more for a navigator.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. But anyway, I'll never forget that. Like he asked if he could buy it for his son, and then that I guess planted little seeds that grew fruits when I was in your class, and I realized, oh wait a second, franchising is like this model that's pretty much like branding and distribution and growing your brand with other people's time, money, and effort. So it was pretty cool.
Well, that story, that reminds me of how that happened. I'd forgotten it. And one of the best ways to recruit students is when someone like you comes and asks me questions, I say, why don't you just drop in on my class at 2 o'clock and see for yourself what's going on? I don't have to sell it. That got you involved. But I also knew from the very beginning you were a special student because you were not special in a bad way by any means, special in that you were very polite. So I didn't know you were a Marine right away, but eventually Marines are very respectful and polite. I appreciated that. And you were really interested in learning. You weren't a 19-year-old or a 21-year-old. Not that that's bad. You were a little bit older, had some experience, and you valued the education. Whereas, when you're 18 and 19, you're there to have fun. Even at PBA, you want to have fun, or you want to get over to the water, you want to go surfing. You
Yeah.
must not be there concentrating in that first year or two on your studies, but you did. You knew the value of it, and that was more impressive that's the kind of student we all gravitate to. We want students who hang on what we're talking about and take advantage of what we bring into the classroom. So I thank you for doing that as well, and for being a special student. Also a student who has a business is another type of special student, because you're already in it day to day. You know what goes on in a business. You know it's not easy to operate a business. You don't know anything about branding, but you know you need branding, for example. And so you come to college to find that out. But how did it happen? Why Palm Beach Atlantic University? How did you get there?
So I like to say that God brought me to Palm Beach Atlantic University.
Me too.
So that fall semester, I was supposed to get into fire school, but Palm Beach State, because I got my associate's degree, I spent 2 years getting that an associate's degree in architecture, and then COVID happened to everyone. So I kind of took like a year off. I took care of my grandma, and unfortunately she passed away. And then, but I had to get myself out of like a little rut that I was in, right? So I was like, all right, well, if I like this business stuff, I have some real estate experience. I've been studying, but so my cousin's a firefighter, and apparently they only work like 2 days a week or something like that.
Risky days, but yeah.
But so in my head I said, you know what, if I become a firefighter, then I can still have a business. So I started to do that. So I actually became a licensed EMT, and I was supposed to get into fire school that fall, right? So it was about a year worth of education, and I didn't get into fire school like I wanted to, but I was able to get into PBA 2 weeks late into a semester with a full course load, accepted in class, just beginning studying right away. And then my first business class was Intro to Business with Professor Jarvis.
Jarvis.
And
he owns car washes around town.
He does, multi-location car washes, not franchise, but he doesn't need to, right? So anyway, so he was talking about car washes, and I'm like, wow, like this is really inspirational. And then my wheels started spinning, and I'm like, well, wait a second. If I start my own detailing, I can't buy a car wash right now, but if I start my own detailing business, I can apply everything that I'm learning in this textbook into my business, like in real life. So that's what I started to do. And that's how God led me to, sometimes God has a way of some things don't work out. One door closes and other doors open that you would have like zero, like just understanding, or like, I would never have said, I didn't even know, I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida. I went to Forest Hill High School. I didn't really even realize that Palm Beach Atlantic was like a real option for me. I always thought it was like this super tiny, small faith-based school, which was cool, but I never saw myself going there. It wasn't a part of the plan.
Yeah. Well, that's the way God works in our lives. And as you know, my life is all about doors closing and doors opening. That's how I moved to Kuwait and lived there for 7 years to teach, and loved every moment of it. It's how I came to West Palm Beach, because God planned it that way. I got a phone call just at the right time. They're going to start the Titus Center. Mr. Titus was my client, and God took care of the rest. And here I am 9 years later, probably the longest I've ever stayed in one job, or the longest I've ever been in one place, except for when I grew up and lived there for a long time in Ohio. That's the way it works in our lives. And in so many ways, while it can be a little frustrating, and you don't know which door is going to open, and you don't know if you should go through it or not, sometimes you get halfway through it and it knocks you in the head and knocks you backwards. And so you got to go through another door. But it sure is more interesting, I think, that way, and has led to a marvelous career for me. And you're on track for a marvelous career already. Talk about, what'd you do after you graduated with a concentration in franchising? What's your degree in?
So my degree is in management with a concentration in franchising. My first job coming out of PBA was technically a junior consultant at a startup business advisory firm. So my detailing business that I had while I was studying actually got T-boned. My truck got T-boned. So I got a check from the insurance company, which that was my first exit, right? I got an insurance check. So, but I did take that as a point to say, okay, I could either use this money, buy another truck, keep going down the detailing route and do this. Or I could take a step back in my entrepreneurship stuff, get a job and get paid to learn, because that's how I look at jobs. That's how I've always looked at jobs. So I'm getting paid to learn by someone who's been there, done that. So I took a job as a junior consultant at a firm called A&D Advisory out of Coral Springs, and we were doing construction companies and stuff like that. Well, coincidentally, a board member rented the office space next to the job that I had gotten in Coral Springs, and I ran into the board member at an event at school, and I was like, "Oh, do you live around here?" Because people fly into this event. So I asked her if she lived around here, and she said yes. And I said, "Where?" She's like, "Oh, Coral Springs." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. I just got a job in Coral Springs." She's like, "Oh, where?" And I'm like, "Oh, A&D Advisory." She's like, "Oh, that sounds really familiar. What floor? What building are you in? What floor are you on?" So I'm like, "Oh, that's okay. All right." So I'm on like the third floor, and she's like, "Yeah, I just rented the office space next to you,"
Oh,
which created this opportunity to create a relationship with Madalena with Bright Pink, and then she eventually invited me onto her leadership team, where I served on that for about 2 years.
yeah.
During my time there, I noticed kind of a gap in what we were offering to some of our national clients, was that local content, right? So local content was something that's very difficult to scale in marketing. So I came up with an idea for an app, and the app was going to be like Uber, but for people's phones, where like college kids could go out and get local content for multi-location businesses. And that was the first iteration of Candid. And then on the side, while I was doing that, I was doing fractional CMO work, making a little extra money at local level with like local chiropractors, local businesses, that kind of stuff, helping them source vendors and that kind of thing. And my partner now, Henry, was working for another agency called Haibu, and he wanted to sell the chiropractor that I was advising at the time. So instead of selling me, I sold him on the idea of Candid, and we've been partners ever since.
So before we get to Candid, let's take a step back and say, anyone who's not a believer who hears your story, how do you explain all of these things happening that you had no control of, that you didn't plan? You didn't know Madalena. You didn't know you were going to run into her. You weren't trying to get a job with her. Here she rents space next to where you are, which was all accidental, coincidental. But how firmly we know that God had a hand in guiding you through this maze of starting a career.
Yeah. I feel like the story itself is the belief, right? Like you don't need to necessarily have a belief in God to know that there's a plan, right? That there's a plan for all of us. And I think that God, like we all receive messages when we're ready for them. So I don't know how I would explain it to somebody who, if they ask me, oh, like how did you do all of this? I can only tell them my story, and then also, of course, I'm a really big believer in positive energy, positive thinking, and like just just I, faith, and making sure that I'm always open to opportunity, and not saying no to a lot of things, or that's that's how it's played out in my life,
Yeah.
right? So
So we were getting up to Candid. So tell everybody, what's Candid? What should they know about that?
so did I share with you actually that I got a stop order on the name Candid Collective?
No, you didn't tell me that, but
So that's very
that's
recent.
my first business. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Candid was originally an app idea. To the problem that the app was going to solve was local content at scale. So we started investing in some developers, and building out this technology, but it didn't end up working out in the way that we wanted to. It was pretty expensive. We didn't get the traction that we needed. It was just way more complicated. We were bootstrapping it, so we didn't have the money to keep going. But what we did end up with was a team. We had graphic designers, developers that were helping us build this technology. And then we were like, well, you know what? At the time, I was still at my job. and my baby was about to be born. And so I told my employer, I said, I have to do this now, right? I can't take the safe route and continue to work, for you. I can work with you, which we did actually. So if there was one thing about Madalena, she was very, very supportive. So, she totally understood, and she was like,
She's on the Titus Center advisory board with Bright Pink, and very, very helpful to our students as you're describing her.
and so I took that leap of faith. Again, it comes back to faith. The revenue was probably not at where it should be for that business, for me to go full time into it. But what I didn't want was for my daughter to be the reason that I took the safe route and that I never went all in on my business.
Right.
So that was going on a year ago now. So I've been operating for about a year, and since doing that, I doubled the revenue that we were doing. And I've been, I have not had a job. I've been unemployed since.
But Candid is not an app or just an app anymore, right? So talk about what do you do at Candid?
Yeah, so Candid evolved into a full service digital marketing agency. We're video focused, so we produce videos. To this point, we've done some pretty cool videos for brands like Dove. In the franchise space, we've done 3 natives, Dream Vacations. They're a subsidiary of World Travel Holdings. They're one of the largest vacation franchises. And yeah, so we've been blessed to do some really cool brands. We did a video for DoorDash. That was pretty cool. So we do a lot of like advertising, video campaigns, and stuff like that. We create high quality creative and then help brands distribute that. And we're also a framer expert shop, which is pretty cool, which is just like a modern WordPress in a way.
Yeah, good. All right. So you, what's the one thing about franchising that you took away from Titus Center and PBA? One thing, if you can bring it down to that gets you excited every day, or that you dream about or figure it's something you're going to use to continue building your career in whatever direction your career is going to go. What is it about franchising that's so exciting for a young person?
So for me, it's that you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself, right? And the IFA does pay me to say that. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously. So since that quote's been around for it's not an IFA quote, but I think that they're doing no, they're doing their campaign right now is franchising is local. I think that's what they're going.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. So because it's true, because the local owners are local, they're contributing to the local economy. But anyway, I digress for a second. Franchising for me, since I got out of the Marine Corps, I kind of flip-flopped around, right? Like it was very difficult to find footing. It's like when you're in the Marine Corps, you have you have a brotherhood. You're surrounded by your brothers and sisters in arms. And then in the civilian world, oftentimes we're left out to fend for ourselves in a way, right? Or if you have a job, your employer might not care about you, that kind of stuff. So what really struck me with franchising, and potentially it's because of the amazing board, but my exposure to these entrepreneurs that I would not normally get anywhere else, that to me was like, wow, these people are so open about their businesses and willing to help in any capacity, whether you're a supplier.
You're talking about the Titus Center Advisory Board.
Yeah, the Titus Center Advisory Board, but franchising as a whole breeds this community, because it's not an industry, right? But it does breed a community of entrepreneurial minded people that are all trying to scale their way using a very similar system or a very similar set of rules. So it creates this language that you can speak with a certain amount of, like a small percentage of people. And then that language, I think, in my opinion, is what creates that community. In the Marine Corps, we call it a spirited corps. In franchising, I don't know, maybe we could come up with like a spirited de franquicia or something like something like that.
Well, speaking of that, as a veteran, and I don't know that I ever spoke about this in class, and shame on me if I didn't, but I don't get many veterans in my classroom. But did I ever talk about the VetFran program and how you can take advantage of VetFran?
Yeah, so we have definitely talked about it before. I don't remember if it was in class or not,
Right.
but at IFA there's a VetFran committee, and
Yeah.
I have attended several of those meetings before. I know all of the board members. I've represented the Titus Center there. So last year I went on a rant about the Titus Center at the VetFran
Right.
to the distress of. But I think I told you about that situation. But
Right.
anyway,
So
but yes,
VetFran
no.
essentially has all these franchisors who want veterans to become franchisees because veterans know how to get out of bed in the morning and they know how to follow a system, and franchising counts on people following a system. And you can be entrepreneurial, of course, but if you're too entrepreneurial, you won't want to follow the system. Marines are not too entrepreneurial. They want to, and people out of the Navy, out of the Army, out of the Coast Guard, these are all veterans who would make great franchisee developers of their own local businesses. And franchisors help you. They give you discounts, they give you money. There are other opportunities that you can get through being a veteran and develop a business of your own as under a franchise brand. Someday you may decide you're going to do that, and you've got that benefit available to you because once a veteran, you're always a veteran. So you can make use of that. All veterans can, but they don't know it. Unfortunately, we don't do a good enough job. Just like why is it that people don't know about franchising? And when you come to college, you didn't come to college knowing you were going to study franchising, and when you did, it would change your career. You didn't know that. You had no way of knowing that. And yet,
No.
what are we doing wrong? Either in franchising, what are we doing wrong at Palm Beach Atlantic that instead of 100 students in franchising, we don't have 300 students in franchising? What do we need to do better?
So I think that franchising in general, it can be kind of confusing because if you ask most people franchise, they either think of McDonald's or some people think of, like movie franchises, right? So for me, and I know that, you just kind of mentioned that being too entrepreneurial minded isn't the best for potentially being a franchisee. But I think that franchising is not just Z and Zor and supplier. It's like they're like all kind of three, and it's another form of entrepreneurship. So I almost wish that we could come up with like a different name for franchising, because as soon as I think that you give like a name and you have to like force people to think about what that means,
Right,
instead of just like, oh, entrepreneurship, this is a great way to grow your business.
right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what franchising is.
Yeah.
It's
And people get hung up on the word and they think McDonald's and then they think flipping burgers and frying potatoes. And I have had students whose parents said, no, you're not allowed to study franchising because we're not sending you to college to flip burgers.
Yeah.
So parents are misinformed, but not just parents. Most of America knows very little about franchising. So you end up coming out of the Marine Corps and coming to college at Palm Beach Atlantic University, small Christian university. Who would have thought we have one of the country's largest, most effective programs in teaching franchising? You wouldn't expect that. And even if you knew it, you wouldn't know do I really want to flip burgers? I don't think I want to work for McDonald's. And yet I haven't had a student go to work for McDonald's. They've gone to work for Chick-fil-A very happily. And
Yeah.
Some of our graduates are becoming Chick-fil-A owner-operators very happily. These are not opportunities where you're necessarily working in the kitchen unless you want to. But you have, as a franchisee, a much larger role, giving you an opportunity. But fortunately, you had Professor Cohey in your management class, and you asked about branding and franchising and marketing, and he said, well, you need to go find Dr. Hayes. And, like a good Marine, you listened to what you were told, you did it, and it changed your career. It changed your whole focus on the future.
Absolutely. I mean, so much to the point that I did start. I think you said that last
Yeah,
time I saw you, your class was reading this, so I
yes,
thought it was a good time to pull it back out.
right,
And whether you're franchising or not, in the E-Myth, Michael Gerber talks about treating your business like a franchise prototype anyway.
right.
So that's kind of what I'm working on now. But I do think that it would be a pretty cool franchise anyway. But to take it back a step, I'm the franchise prototype is what we're doing now. Of which franchising, you need the three things, right? Trademark, significant control over the operations of a business, and a startup investment of $500 or more.
Yeah.
So I learned the trademark lesson, very, very difficult.
Uh-huh.
So right now I got a stop order for my name, Candid Collective. But being the half glass full person that I am, I'm taking it as like a pat on the back because in a lot of ways, when we rebranded to Candid Collective from Candid Socials, I noticed that there were other Candid Collectives. I did my research and I said, these are all different services. I'll just outmarket them all. And when people think Candid Collective, they will think of my business.
Yeah.
And we successfully did that. We rank at the top of Google, but the woman that owns Candid Collective, Trademark, enforced her trademark. So it doesn't matter how good at marketing you are. If somebody has a trademark on something, you should not be using that name.
Yeah.
So
So what do
definitely
you do
learned
now?
that.
How's that changing your path?
So we're gonna change the name just to a different. So we're gonna use the word catalyst. So like a catalyst takes something and makes it bigger, causes a reaction. Think if you have a fire, you pour gasoline onto the fire, it
Yeah.
becomes bigger, which is a lot of ways what we do for businesses. Whether that's through an advertisement campaign, whether that's through better creative, whatever that is, we are oftentimes the catalyst for a larger output of that business.
Speaking of getting with 70,000 businesses in West Palm Beach, and it's funny that you brought that up because I want to run something by you that I know you know about already. I think one of the most effective ways for someone like you who's in a business that other businesses need all the time, one of the most effective ways for you to do that is by networking with as many of those other businesses as you can. And a perfect little franchise that I know you know about, and I think you've been involved with Royas Assad already, is National Lead Exchange. I see you as a franchisee of a National Lead Exchange network having breakfast every Tuesday morning somewhere in West Palm Beach or in Wellington or Jupiter or wherever it may be, building your network. There's a new group that just formed on Monday for Palm Beach Island, which is going to be magnificent. I'd like to see them meet at Palm Beach Atlantic University. That would be great. But I see you, Matt, as a guy who could attract 50 other businesses out of 70,000 businesses in West Palm Beach. You could find the right 50, and you can only have one business lawyer, one commercial realtor, one residential real estate agent, et cetera, one of a kind. And they all broker and network together. It takes you about an hour and a half on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday for lunch or whenever it is that you get together. And there you generate, all of them need your services, your catalyst services. I think that's something you ought to look at some point.
Yeah, I've given it some thought for sure. Me and Roy Assad are pretty close. Roy is actually a client of it's Catalyst,
Yeah,
Lysc.
yeah.
Catalyst, there's a bunch of
Catalyst.
trademarks on Catalyst, but not Catalyst
All
or
right.
Catalyst, if you want to get fancy.
Yeah.
So I've given that a lot of thought. I think a business opportunity like that fits nicely into a lot of B2B. So I really like NLX. I think it's a great alternative to BNI. I think BNI is actually sold out. Like you can't buy a BNI right now if you wanted to.
What a great business. And Mary Thompson, who came to Titus Center and shared her wisdom with us last winter or a year ago winter, comes out of the Dwyer Group. And United States Marine
Corps.
No, there we go again. But I think, and people talk about, well, I can't get into franchising because I don't have $1 million or I don't have $500,000. What do you need to buy an NLX franchise?
I would not be able to tell you off the top of my head, but I think it's less than $20,000.
Definitely less than $20,000.
And
$10,000. I'm not sure right now because they're growing, but
yeah, it's pretty cost effective. I think that you will make your money back from having that business. But more importantly, if you're in a B2B space or any space, even if you're a realtor or something, you could own this, and then all of those entrepreneurs that are in your group become your customers for your other income. So it's a perfect example of, you don't have to flip burgers or to get into franchising. You can get into franchising by looking at what you're doing now and saying, what's another business that could add to what I'm doing? So another opportunity that I've kind of like meandered is the sign business, Signorama. I would love to own a Signorama. Why? Because
a little bit more money than NLX, but
100%.
Signorama both came from the same brainwave over there at United Franchise Group.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So there, franchising can fit into a lot of people's lives in many, many different ways. For me, what I learned at the Titus Center, will go with me to the grave. I mean, I'm extremely grateful. I would not have the business that I have or the clients that I have or any of that without it. So I'm very, very happy in franchising.
Great. Well, before we close, I got one other thing I want to talk to you about. Aren't you going to make me a movie star? Don't you have some kind of a video or a film about franchising? And where is that? And how should franchisors be involved in that? And where can people get involved? What's it all about?
Yeah, so we are partnering right now with MFE Expositions to produce a show called The Franchise. And The Franchise is going to be a show that highlights the duality of in the trade show to the real life of a franchise opportunity. So kind of behind the scenes of what that is like, and it's exclusively for emerging brands. So we're going to film about 6 episodes. We filmed the pilot episode. So the best way to get involved is probably through MFE Expositions, just kind of keeping an eye open for any communications through them. And keep your eye open on my LinkedIn for the pilot episode whenever that comes out. So that will hopefully come out in the next couple of weeks here. So it's a lot of editing, it's a lot of back and forth, and this is not good enough. And so it will come out in the next 2 weeks, hopefully.
Good. Well, I wish you a lot of luck with that. And of course, it's near and dear to my heart because I'm going to participate with you. Love MFV. Again, one of the original members of the Titus Center Advisory Board. They come to the campus twice a year. They share their wisdom with our students. They recruit our students. They want to work with our students, lead them to opportunities like you have found in franchising. And I'm glad you're part of it all. And I appreciate the fact that you're right here in West Palm Beach, right where the Titus Center is, right where I am, and that we have an opportunity to get together.
Likewise.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.